rock and learn!
Who were you expecting?
Hey, Marko. I didn't know you came from a chrysalis.
Well, actually I don't. But I wanted to get a real feel for life science. It gets awfully cramped in here.
Tell me about it.
Hey, Marko, could you help me review for my life science test?
Sure, Kevin. Oh, this is Bailey. She just happens to be an expert in life science.
I sure am.
All right, this'll be fun!
Off we go to my super science station.
Whoa, Marko! You have...
Were you saying something?
Never mind.
Let me tell you, Kevin, there's a whole world of information about life science.
I know. I'm not even sure where to begin.
Well, I like to start at the Plant Learning Center.
Tell us what you know about plants, Kevin.
Well, some examples of plants are trees, shrubs, vines, grasses, and flowering plants. And plants can produce their own food.
They sure can. But do you know how plants make their food?
My teacher said plants need water, air, light, and nutrients.
That's right. The leaves of plants contain a colored pigment called chlorophyll. Chlorophyll makes plants appear green and helps them absorb the energy from sunlight for a process called photosynthesis.
During photosynthesis, plants use energy from the sun to convert carbon dioxide from the air, along with water and nutrients from the soil, into glucose and oxygen. Glucose is a sugar used as food for the plant, and oxygen is given off as a waste product.
Plants may not need oxygen, but we sure do. Isn't oxygen what we breathe?
You bet your sweet lungs it is. You breathe in what the plants put out.
Okay, boys. Let's talk about the parts of plants. Many plants have 6 basic parts: roots, stems, leaves, flowers, fruits, and seeds.
I like the roots because they provide support for the plant by anchoring it into the ground.
The roots also absorb water and nutrients from the soil, which the plant needs to grow.
And did you know that the roots can store sugar and carbohydrates for the plant to use for food?
Cool! So the roots are used to support the plant, gather water and nutrients, and store the food that the plant makes.
The primary root grows first and is the thickest. It grows downwards. Secondary roots grow out from the primary root in many directions.
On this plant, notice that the secondary roots are not as thick as the primary root.
And these tiny little roots that cover the other roots are called root hairs. They maximize water and nutrient absorption from the soil.
Now let's look at what stems from the roots. Above the ground, stems and branches support the leaves and flowers of the plant. The branches help the leaves reach the sunlight they need.
For photosynthesis?
Good, you're paying attention. The stems also contain special tubes made of cells called xylem cells and phloem cells. Xylem cells draw water and minerals up from the roots to upper sections of the plant's body, like the leaves. Phloem cells transport glucose throughout the plant to give it energy to grow and reproduce. If the plants don't need the sugar right away, they convert it to starch for long-term storage in the roots.
Look! It's Rubbert Plant! I want to get his autograph!
Hey kid, let me tell you my experience with Xylem and Phloem. They are kind of like the circulatory system of the plant. When someone chops down a dead tree, those rings are what's left of old xylem cells. And if you ever see sap dripping from a tree, that sap usually comes from the phloem.
I never knew that! Hey, Mr. Plant, will you sing for us before you go?
Oh, I couldn't, really.
Please?
Well, all right then. Perhaps just a bit. Xylem, Phloem, you might need to know 'em. Xylem, Phloem, they help strengthen plants and grow 'em. Xylem, Phloem. I come from the land of the Xylem and the Phloem. I brought some pictures and I want to show 'em. Xylem cells bring water and minerals plants need. Phloem cells move sugars around to give plants energy. Ooh yeah, ooh yeah, ooh yeah, ooh yeah. It's been a long time, been a long time, been a long Phloem, Xylem.
Mr. Plant, that was awesome! Although that last part didn't make a lot of sense.
Whatever. Glad you liked it, kid. Now, I really have to leave. Did you hear that? Did you hear what I said? Leave! You guys should talk about the leaves of plants. Cheerio!
The leaves are one of the most important parts of a plant.
Because they make food for the whole plant.
Exactly. And we get 98% of the oxygen in Earth's atmosphere from photosynthesis. Most of that comes from algae and marine plants.
Wow! Now let's see, where were we? We've covered the roots, the stems, and the leaves. What about the flowers?
Flowers aren't just pretty things to look at, you know. They are very important because they help the plant to make seeds. Let's take a closer look at a flower. First, check out this bud. See the tiny green leaf-like parts around the bud? Those are called sepals. They help to protect the bud as it develops.
As the flower opens, the petals become the main attraction. Get it? They're the main attraction because they help attract pollinators such as bees, bats, birds, and even butterflies.
I know how this works. Pollinators come to the flowers. As they move around the flowers, they pick up pollen that is on the anther, which is the top part of the stamen. The anthers are held up by these long stalks called filaments. As the pollinators move around, some of the pollen gets on the animal. It can be moved to another flower or the same flower until it gets stuck to the top of the pistil, which is called the stigma. The sticky stigma is usually found in the center of the flower. The pollen then travels down a long tube called the style all the way to the ovary. The ovary contains female egg cells called ovules. The pollen fertilizes the ovules and they become seeds. The ovaries become the fruit.
Wow! Where did you learn all of that?
I was helping my grandpa pick peaches off his trees and I asked him how a peach was made.
Your grandpa knew what he was talking about. The fruit is the ripened ovary of a plant containing the seeds. After fertilization, the ovary swells. Ovaries can become soft, like on the peaches you picked. But sometimes ovaries dry and harden to protect the developing seeds, like a walnut or a pecan.
Some fruits even help seeds spread by letting them travel on the wind, like the propeller-shaped wings on maple tree seeds, or white dandelion fluff.
Hey, learning about plants can be a breeze!
Other seeds attach themselves to an animal's fur or human's clothing and end up moving far away from the parent plant.
I can see how that would happen.
And animals sometimes swallow seeds when they eat the fruit. Some seed coats are strong enough to pass all the way through an animal's digestive tract, so the seed is deposited along with fertilizer from the animal, if you know what I mean.
Ew.
Every seed is a tiny plant ready to grow called an embryo, and it has already formed leaves, a stem, and root parts. The seed is just waiting for the right conditions to make it germinate and grow.
And then the whole cycle of growing, producing food, pollination, and seed production can start all over again. Hey! What's happening? Whoa! Some people ride motorcycles, but we got to ride a life cycle!
We sure did! But plants aren't the only organisms that have life cycles.
That's the truth. Just look at this. This is the story of my life and the life cycle of all butterflies. See? This is a picture of me as a wee little egg.
How can you tell which one is yours?
Why, it's the prettiest one, of course. And this is me as a newly hatched caterpillar. Aren't I cute?
That's just larvalous.
Huh?
I mean, marvelous.
He is making a play on words, Kevin. Larva is the second stage of development in the life cycle of a butterfly. That's when we're in a caterpillar form. During the larval stage, we eat. A lot. Then, when our skin gets too tight, we molt or shed our outer skin and repeat the process until we've become nice and plump.
Oh, yes. See how big she is in this picture? That's what she looked like just before she became a pupa.
A pupil? You mean a student?
No, silly. He said pupa. That's the third stage, where caterpillars are enclosed in a chrysalis. Inside the chrysalis, we complete our metamorphosis.
That means she transformed from an awkward caterpillar
Hey!
into a beautiful butterfly.
Well, I guess I do like the way I turned out. The pupa stage is where I got my exoskeleton and my wings.
Exo what?
Exoskeleton. It means having a skeleton outside.
So let me get this straight. As a butterfly, you start as an egg. Next, you hatch into a larva, and you eat, grow, and molt. Eat, grow, and molt.
Several times.
Then you become a pupa. That's where you rest and complete your transformation. And finally, you emerge from the chrysalis as an adult butterfly. Then you lay eggs, and the whole process starts over again.
And that's actually the life cycle of many types of insects.
Butterflies, moths, beetles, ants, flies, bees, and wasps, just to name a few.
Not all insects go through all 4 stages of the life cycle, but all insects belong to a large group of similar animals called arthropods.
That is one big group, too. Over 80% of all known animal species are arthropods.
Wow!
Let's play a game! I'll list some characteristics of an animal group, and you tell me if that is the group you belong to. All of the animals in this group have an exoskeleton. They have segmented bodies and jointed legs. All of them are cold-blooded.
The body temperature of a cold-blooded animal is dependent on the temperature of its environment.
Do you belong to this group?
No, I don't have an exoskeleton.
But I do.
Correct. That group of animals is called arthropods. And that includes butterflies.
Okay, second round. Listen closely. All of the animals from this group are vertebrates, which means they have a spine. They have gills for breathing underwater. Most of the animals in this group are covered in scales and have fins. Do you belong to this group?
Well, I do have a backbone, but I don't have gills. No, I don't belong in that group.
Great job. That group of animals is called fish.
Okay, next round. Listen closely. All of the animals from this group begin life with gills and live in water. Later, they develop lungs and live on land. They have moist, hairless skin. All of them are cold-blooded, and they lay their eggs in water. Do you belong to this group?
No, I've got quite a bit of hair on my head.
Oh, Kevin, you're good at this game. That group of animals is called amphibians.
Now remember, I list the characteristics, and you determine if you belong to that group. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
All of the animals from this group are vertebrates. These animals lay their eggs on land, and they have scales. All of them are cold-blooded. Do you belong to this group?
No, I'm not cold-blooded. My temperature stays around 98.6 degrees.
Hooray! You're right again! That group of animals is called reptiles.
Okay, this list is a little longer. Are you ready?
Sure, I can do it.
All of the animals from this group are warm-blooded vertebrates. They breathe air, and they are bipedal.
That means they walk on two legs, like you.
The animals in this group also lay hard-shelled eggs, and all of them have feathers, wings, and beaks. Do you belong to this group?
Wow, as you were reading that first part, I thought that was going to be it. But when you got to the end, I don't have feathers, wings, or a beak.
Whew, that was a close one. That group of animals is called birds.
Now I think you're ready for a real challenge.
I'm ready.
All of the animals from this group are warm-blooded vertebrates. They breathe air and have hair or fur. Most of the animals in this group are born live, not hatched from an egg. And the mothers produce milk after birth to feed their offspring. All of these animals have 3 middle ear bones and a 4-chambered heart in their circulatory system. Do you belong to this group?
That's it! That's the group I belong to!
You are a mammal! We have a winner!
A winner? What do I win? What do I win?
You win a new car!
Really? Wow! All right! Hey!
You're not old enough to drive. We'll keep the car for you until you get your license. We're off to the Cellular Learning Center.
Okay. But where is it? I don't see a door.
Well, take a closer look.
I think I may have a little problem with this. Where are we?
Someplace really small. Microscopic even.
Here at the Cellular Learning Center, we're going to learn about plant and animal cells. And you might be surprised that there are more similarities than differences between them.
You mean I'm kind of like a plant?
Your cells share many features with plant cells, but there are important differences too.
For instance, only plant cells have cell walls on the outside, which are made of cellulose. The cell walls help the plant cells maintain their shape.
Both plant and animal cells have a cell membrane surrounding the cell. It allows some things to come in and out of the cell.
And both cells have cytoplasm, which is a jelly-like substance that contains the organelles, the tiny organs of the cell.
Both of these cells have a nucleus, which is where all the genetic material is stored. This genetic material is made of molecules called DNA, or deoxyribonucleic acid. The nucleus contains all the information for running the cell and making new cells.
The nucleus is kind of like the control center. Every cell in an organism with a nucleus has the same genetic material, or DNA. But there are many different types of cells.
How can that be?
Each type of cell is able to perform a different function because certain parts of the genetic instructions are turned off and others are turned on.
Now I see why it's called the control center.
Only animal cells have organelles called centrioles, which aid in cell division.
Animal cells have 2 centrioles that are perpendicular to each other.
That means they're at right angles to each other.
Bravo!
Both plant and animal cells have ribosomes. Ribosomes are important because they help put proteins together.
The Golgi bodies take the proteins that the ribosomes make and package them so they are easier to move.
The endoplasmic reticulum, or ER for short, is the transportation network. It takes the protein packages from the Golgi bodies and moves them to where they are needed around the cell. Some of the ER is smooth and some is rough. The rough ER has ribosomes on the outside.
Both animal and plant cells get their energy from the mighty mitochondria.
Plants have one really large organelle called a vacuole that fills a big part of the cell. In a plant cell, the vacuole primarily holds water, but can also hold nutrients and waste. When a plant has too little water in its vacuoles, the plant wilts.
Do animal cells have vacuoles?
Yes, but they only have very small ones. Their only roles are to digest things in the cell and get rid of cell waste.
Do you remember what the plants have that's green and helps them with photosynthesis?
Sure I do, Marko. It's chlorophyll.
Smart boy! Chlorophyll is stored in the organelles of the plant cells that are called chloroplasts.
Lysosomes are a common organelle in animal cells, but aren't found in many plant cells. They help get rid of waste in animal cells and help with cell defense.
Boy, cells are just packed full of stuff.
Okay, Kevin, let's see how much you remember about the differences between the animal cell and the plant cell.
Sure thing. The plant cell has a cell wall and chloroplasts. This animal cell doesn't have those. Second, the vacuoles in the plant cell are larger than the vacuoles in the animal cell. And finally, the animal cell has centrioles and lysosomes, but this plant cell doesn't.
Excellente! It's time we got growing!
Huh? Oh yeah, we do need to size things up.
You're right! Here we go!
This doesn't look good.
It sure doesn't. This ecosystem is way out of balance.
And I'm thinking we are still a bit too tiny.
Let's get out of here.
We made it to the Ecosystem Learning Center.
An ecosystem is a living community which depends on each of its living members as well as things like temperature, water availability, and the richness of the soil. Ecosystems vary in size. They can be as small as a puddle or as large as the earth itself.
Within each ecosystem, there are habitats, which may also vary in size. A habitat is the place where a population lives. A population is a group of organisms of the same kind living in the same place at the same time. The habitat must supply the needs of the organisms, such as food, water, temperature, oxygen, and minerals. If the population's needs are not met, it will try to move to a better habitat.
Every organism in an ecosystem has an important part to play in the community. A food chain shows the feeding relationship from one organism to the next, and to the next, and to the next in an ecosystem. The arrows in the food chain show how the energy from one organism is transferred to the next.
The sun is the original source of energy for most food chains on Earth. It provides energy for the plants to produce their own food. So plants are considered the producers in most food chains.
That means the algae is the producer in this food chain.
Magnifico! I like the way you apply what you're learning. Most animals cannot make their own food, so they must eat plants or other animals to get the energy they need to live. All animals are considered consumers. Herbivores or plant eaters consume plants. Carnivores consume other animals.
So in this food chain, the mayfly, the trout, and the bald eagle are consumers.
I think he's got it. Now, which ones are herbivores and which ones are carnivores?
The mayflies are herbivores because they only eat algae. The trout and the bald eagle are carnivores because they eat other animals.
Fantastic! Now, what do you suppose would happen if a bunch of fishermen came and caught all of the trout?
Well, there would probably be a lot more mayflies.
And what would happen to the algae?
I guess it would get eaten up by all the extra mayflies.
That's right. And without as many trout, the eagles would probably have less to eat too. See how the organisms all rely on each other? We actually left out one important part of the food chain. Decomposers, like bacteria, break down both plants and animals when they die. The nutrients that were in those organisms go back into the soil for the plants to use.
I understand. So it's almost like a cycle.
Yes, but actually food chains are a bit oversimplified as to what really happens in nature. The food chain only shows one pathway for the energy to be transferred between organisms. Most consumers feed on several species.
These interconnected food chains form a food web. Take a look at this food web. Some animals, like humans, may even eat plants and animals. Organisms that eat both plants and animals are called omnivores.
Can you tell which of the animals in this food web are omnivores?
Let's see. Something that eats both plants and animals.
Remember that the arrows show the direction of the flow of energy. So the arrows point away from what is being eaten.
The producers are the pine tree, the algae, the grass, and the huckleberry bushes. So the only animal I see that eats from the producers and other consumers is the grizzly bear.
Bravo, Kevin!
Remember how I said that a habitat must supply the needs of the organisms?
Yes?
Well, sometimes things can change in a habitat or in the population itself that will negatively affect the numbers of the population.
Like what?
Extreme weather, diseases, pollution, overfishing, overhunting, or even introducing a new population of animals. Any of these can have a big effect on populations in an ecosystem.
Nature is usually pretty good at balancing things over time.
I can see that. Everything in the ecosystem is connected. And because they all depend on each other, a balance is maintained.
You got it! But if several of those factors change all at once, and the wildlife population cannot find a new habitat suitable for them, they can become endangered, or even extinct.
But sometimes when the environment changes, the animal populations are able to keep up through genetic adaptation. Let me tell you a story about a type of moth that lived in England. Originally, most of the peppered moths were light-colored because the trees that they rested on had light bark and lichens.
So they had good camouflage.
Exactly. A few here and there were darker, but most of the darker ones got eaten.
Ew!
By birds. They were eaten by birds.
Oh, probably because the birds could see them better.
You understand how this works.
Then people in England built factories that put out a lot of pollution. Eventually, the tree bark turned dark from the soot.
Uh-oh!
Fortunately, a few of the moths in the population had genes which made them a little darker, but they were still able to hide from the birds.
Over time, most of the peppered moths got darker and darker because it was easier for the dark peppered moths to survive on the soot-covered trees. One day, the British people decided they didn't like the pollution and they started cleaning up the way they ran the factories. The tree bark once again became lighter and lighter.
I'll bet the moth population changed back over time too.
You catch on fast, Kevin. The peppered moth population was able to survive because they had a range of genes that produced different colors of wings. So there were always some that could survive. If the bark was light, the lighter ones survived to have offspring. If the bark was dark, the darker ones survived to have offspring.
In other words, the genetic traits that work the best for animals in certain habitats get passed on from generation to generation since they survive.
And if the environment or habitat changes, then the traits that work best are those that surviving animals will have.
Sometimes people select the genetic traits of animals they want.
Huh? How do they do that?
Look at some of the different dog breeds available today. To get these breeds, people selected dogs with specific traits that help them do certain tasks. For example, Alaskan Malamutes were bred by people in Alaska long ago. They chose large dogs with thick coats. Dogs with these traits could pull sleds in the cold weather. They also looked for dogs that were intelligent, loyal, and affectionate to their masters, so that the animals could be helpful in times of danger.
Scottish shepherds bred collies to help them tend sheep. Collies have long coats to keep them warm in the winters, and the double coat around their necks and chests protects them from wolves that might come after the sheep.
Dachshunds were bred to have short legs, muscular bodies, and strong canine teeth. Choosing specific dogs for breeding gave dachshunds bold temperaments to hunt badgers, even if it meant following them into their burrows.
I see how breeding animals to have certain characteristics could be really beneficial for people.
You betcha! All living populations can adapt genetically. These genetic changes can be affected by the environment or by people.
I guess that about wraps things up.
Yep, I'm ready for my life science test now.
Bye-bye for now.
Good luck on your test!
Whoa, I guess Marko really did wrap things up. Hey, Marko!